I'm
We're
so
here.
thrilled to be here
Thrilled
with
to
my
be here
good
with you.
friend Nancy Alspaugh Jackson, and we've got so much information to cover that we don't even have in the news this week
No,
because
it's
there's
got
too
too many
much
guests.
going on.
Right.
And starting with on the phone right now and on Skype, we have Leah Hirschfeld who's with us, and I had just spent a lot of time with her this last weekend at a conference, which I think she's going to talk about. So, Leah is part of the research and development team at the Center for Autism and Related Disorders. And Leah, welcome back to Let's Talk Autism with Shannon and Nancy.
Welcome, Leah.
Thank you so much. I'm really excited to be here.
We're thrilled that you're here too, and I think we've got the Skype picture of you that they're going to put up here in just a second. But in the there you
There
are.
she is.
It's so good to see you again. I feel like I just saw you, and I'm seeing you again. So
You did. You saw me like 48 hours ago.
I know, and this is a regular segment that we have added to the show, you guys, where so often Nancy and I have been trying to cover news stories about research, and we are just, we're not equipped.
We're novices. We don't know it.
And we're slaughtering words and stuff, so we decided to have somebody from research and development join us at least once a month. So Leah is here today, and tell us what we're going to be talking about today, because I love this topic.
Okay, yes, absolutely. I'm going to trip over my words because I'm so excited to talk about it. But before I do, let me also throw a plug at Shannon, who says she's not an expert. But she was one of the invited speakers at the conference I'm going to talk about that we had in San Francisco last weekend. And her talk was incredible. If you haven't heard Shannon speak officially, I know you're all listening to this radio show, but it was amazing. She got a standing ovation, and she's a really incredible speaker, so it was super moving to see her at the conference and have her speak. So though she humbles, but she was really incredible. So what I wanted to talk about is that we had this conference over the weekend in San Francisco. It was the ABAI conference, which is the Association for Behavior Analysis International. And one of the things that opened the conference was a poster session. So a poster session, it was 2 hours long. And it's going to be a time when researchers and usually master's students or doctoral students who are working on a thesis will come and present a poster or a giant piece of paper that will have their methods and their objectives and the research that they've been working on, usually for anywhere from 1 to 3 years. So one of the big takeaways for me was that at this poster session, there was 130 posters. This conference was by no means the largest conference. It had 700 participants, which is a small to medium conference, but there were 130 posters of folks who were just trying to get their information about autism out and the research they've been doing. So that was really exciting. And there were 4 big takeaways, at least for me, as I was walking through the poster session. One was getting dads involved, and also getting them to answer research questions. And we'll come back to all of these, but I'll list them off first. So the first one was fathers of individuals diagnosed with autism. The second was that there was a lot of information going around about the best practices of teaching children with autism. The third was about working with therapists working with therapists who work with individuals with autism, and making sure that we had the best outcomes coming out of that group. And the fourth one, which was really exciting to me because it's something that the R&D team has talked about, but it's exciting to see the whole field kind of talk about it too, is encouraging better outcomes with parents. So again, that whole concept that it takes a village, and that we're not just looking at the individuals with autism, but also everyone who's potentially affected when that diagnosis gets announced. So the first one was fathers. So there were a few posters out there that were looking at getting fathers to respond to the research questions. One individual actually got some fathers to respond. I think he had 250 responses to a survey from fathers of individuals diagnosed with autism. But it took him 2.5 years to get that information, which is kind of crazy. And then there was another woman who was also trying to get fathers of individuals diagnosed with autism to respond to her questions of research. She couldn't do it. She only got moms, and her next step is to try again and get more fathers. But so if you're a female parent who has a male partner, please encourage them to participate in the research. There's indication that potentially that the research is that dads are coping differently and have different reactions when their children are announced to have this diagnosis, and throughout the whole process. So the next one also was about best practices of teaching children with autism. No surprise that at an ABA conference this was there, but the exciting thing to me was the range of information. So there were talks or posters about kids telling jokes to make sure that they understand jokes that their peers are telling, but also so that they can tell their peers jokes. There were posters about community safety signs, so things like stop signs. And then there were lots of posters about teaching nouns and verbs and things like that. So if you're a parent and there's anything that you might think might be too small for us to be researching, or no one is thinking about it, I bet you someone is. That's my takeaway from this poster session. There were so many different talks about so many things. The next one was about the outcomes of therapists, so making sure we're having positive outcomes there. That is to really ensure we're getting the best bang for our buck, right? The one-on-one is happening mostly with therapists, so we want to make sure that those outcomes are great, that those kids are enjoying working with the therapists are enjoying working with kids, the parents are enjoying working with both. So there was talks about making sure that you're having quality data from that group, which is super important because that data is the data that we then use as a BCBA to make sure that we are doing correct programming, that those skills are not just happening at the center, but also happening at home, etc. There were talks about mindfulness with therapists, so making sure that using mindfulness as a tool to potentially encourage better outcomes when you first meet a kiddo, because the better rapport you have, the more they're going to like you, the more they're going to want to do your lessons with you. And the last theme was parents. This was really cool to me and really exciting because it's easy to see how we could only get caught in looking at autism, or only get caught in looking at how the autism affects the individuals diagnosed with it, or genetic, whatever it is. But that's not what was happening at this poster session, and not even during the conference. Shannon's talk was about parents. But also, so was the first opening talk, was about how to encourage appropriate word choices when talking to parents. So as an ABA provider, words like extinction might be something that we use typically, and we know what it means, and we think it's normal. And then what actually happens is when we say it, there is a negative reaction to it because it sounds kind of dark, right? Like extinction, like dinosaurs are dying. So making sure that we're using the right words to really get the right connection from parents, and making sure we're getting their buy-in. So to me, it was really exciting. There was this huge range, and it was great to see that people weren't just focusing on only autism or even only ABA practices, but on this whole range. So as a parent, make sure ask your questions about research, ask your BCBAs what they're doing, and why they're doing it. We're research-based practice, we're data-driven, so there's usually a reason. And get dads involved. Make sure everyone's kind of communicating and on the same page. So thank you so much for letting me go on my spiel. I was really excited about this conference, and I hope that's helpful. If there's anyone who wants to talk more about in depth what posters were, more of the posters, I only got to touch on a few of them, or more about the talks. There were a number of really excellent talks, including Shannon's. Please reach out to me, to the R&D team. If there's any research questions y'all have, we're happy to take a stab and try and answer them as well.
I love that.
Yeah,
Thank
you,
so
Leah.
Much. Have you ever been to a poster session, Nancy?
No, I've never been to a poster session.
And I got to be honest that I'd never heard of it.
I hadn't heard. No, this is the first time I've heard of it.
And whenever there are these scientific things, certainly at these ABAI conferences, they have these poster sessions, and they take the biggest room in the hotel, and there are just rows and rows and rows of these big, huge display boards.
Right.
And people who've done research throughout the year can submit and say, I want to do, and they take all the research that they do, and they encapsulate it all on a poster, and that goes on the wall behind them.
Okay.
And they stand there, and you walk up to them, and there are numbers. There's a program that tell you what it is. You walk up to them, and they will tell you what they researched, and you can ask questions of the researcher.
Oh, what a great thing to be able to do.
And so for those of you, I love the passion, Leah, that you brought to talking about this. If you kind of want to see some of it, we did go downstairs. I brought the Autism Live equipment. And for a half an hour on Friday night, I went live from the poster session and went up to a couple of people. I actually have the guy who did the research that Leah was talking about with the dad and the stress.
Right.
I went up to him and he did a lovely, and there were about 4 others that I got to go up and talk to. But I didn't really have a whole lot of time, and so I just sort of was walking around and showing parents how many posters there were. Because so often we think that we're on a planet by ourselves,
Right.
don't we? And that
absolutely.
nobody's trying to help us, and why isn't somebody trying to crack the code on this behavior right here? And when you see all of these fabulous people with their posters, there is you can't feel like you're alone in this anymore.
Right.
That's like the most luscious thing to me. So I was so thrilled when you said you wanted to talk about the poster session, Leah, because I was like, yes, because I want to talk about it too. The first time that I went to one, there were 2 women who had done a study on tying shoes, and they had found a quicker, easier way to tie shoes to teach kids on the spectrum. And I remember going, why isn't this on the national news?
Right.
So, but we try to put that stuff here, and honestly, we're going to try to connect with some of the people with some of the posters to have them, the ones that I specifically was in love with, to be on the show.
That would be great.
But Leah, you were just so amazing, and we're so lucky that we have this opportunity to have you on from time to time. And I just love how excited you get about it too, because I get excited about it myself. And I think if parents saw, like maybe you wouldn't understand everything at the conference. I didn't. But you would want to go to every poster session you could get to. And even if you only talk to 2 people, I think it would blow your mind to know what's happening in this field.
And I have to say, I didn't understand everything that was going on, but researchers want to talk about their research. So I would go up and they'd be like, do you know what ACT is? Which is acceptance and commitment therapy, which is a huge blown up in our field. And I was like, I haven't heard about it. They're happy to sit there and talk to you. That's why they're standing there. They love to talk about their research, especially to someone who can then say, oh man, that would be so great for my little Johnny, or whatever it is. Talk to researchers, and also on that front, talk to your BCBAs. Ask them about the research being done. If they don't know, they ask someone like me who gets to go do a literature search and gets to look it up, and I get to learn something new, which is awesome. So please, please, please communicate any questions you have about any of it. And
be humble enough to ask questions. You'll see if you go on Facebook and watch the half hour that I ran around like a crazy person around the paper session. The first person I went up to, not the first person, like the third person, I said, so tell me about your research.
Right.
And she said a bunch of stuff, and I said, okay, does that mean X, 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 X? And she said, no, that's not what it means. It means, and then she reworded it, and I said, oh, okay, does it mean this? And I regurgitated back what I thought I heard, and she went, no. And so on the third time she said it, and I said, oh, you mean it's this, this, and this? And she said, yes.
So you finally got it.
And we had this moment, and I said, well, that's important. But be humble enough to say, so is what you're saying this? And because I thought, and I think it was good for her, too, that she was like, oh, clearly I'm not making it clear enough.
Right.
And she would take it down, and that's good practice for them, too. So thank you. Well, I love your enthusiasm, and thank you so much for all the work that you did this weekend. You were just a light there this weekend, and we really appreciated it, and I appreciated it. And thanks for being with us.
Thank you, Leah.
Thank you so much. Thanks,
Good to have you.
I appreciate it.
Take care. Bye-bye. So next up on our wild cavalcade of fabulous people today,
we have the founder of Extraordinary Ventures.
Yes, Lori Ireland is going to be with us, along with Paige
Morrow-Falk, the CEO of Exceptional Ventures, which is
we've talked about them many times on the show before.
We have in the past talked about them, a pioneering nonprofit based in Chapel Hill, North Carolina. And they operate some self-sustaining businesses for kids, adults on the spectrum. So we're going to...
Yes, and they have a new one since the last time we talked to them. So I'm excited to talk about their new business that they have going.
So we're going to take a little break.
Take a break.
Right.